Hello, good afternoon, everybody. You're very welcome to our webinar this afternoon, Building Control 30 Years On. David Rouse is my name, advisor with the Housing Agency on multi-unit developments. And I'm joined by my colleagues in the background to help with tech and your Q&A and other admin, Mary Coffey, Sarah Kennedy and Katrina Lawler. I'm just going to share my screen briefly now to go through some of the housekeeping, if you like, for our session this afternoon. So that's our rough timetable. We'll do our level best to stick to that and finish up by 5 to 1 o'clock. If our Q&A runs over, you're more than welcome to stick with us if we do run over that time, but we'll aim to respect your time on that. You all at this stage be well familiar, no doubt, with the Q&A function, the chat function on Zoom. So please use the Q&A function for your questions to our presenters and the chat function for any problems in the background, and we'll keep an eye on that. The session will be recorded for future use and we expect to make it available on our website. And if you'd like to contact us, info@housingagency.ie for a copy of the slides. A little bit about ourselves. We are located in normal times on Mount Street, just off Merrion Square. Obviously, a lot of us, including myself, are working from home at the moment. We hope you're all staying safe and well under the current circumstances. Just an update in terms of the whole of government approach to COVID-19. As we speak, I believe the government ministers, the Taoiseach, Taoiseach, etc., are announcing the latest updates on the public health measures in place, so you can access that information on gov.ie. I'm going to stop sharing now for a moment and run a brief poll just to understand who is joining us this afternoon. So we'd invite you please to let us know who you are. You can see that poll running now, or an audience survey really, rather than a poll. So the question is, what is your involvement in building control? Are you involved in design certifier or an assigned certifier? Are you involved in building construction? Are you involved in building control with a local authority or other body? Are you involved in the legal or property conveyance sector, or some other role in the sector? We'd be grateful just for your feedback on that. So as we speak, about 75% of you have voted on that. So when I'm finished running that poll, we'll introduce our speakers, and we're delighted to have two expert speakers with us this afternoon on that session. The poll is anonymous, I should say, so feel free, please, to let us know who you are, just in terms of our audience profile. So I'm going to end that polling now, and I will thank you for your attention on that particular aspect. I'll just share the results there. You should be able to see those on your screen. I know some people who are maybe participating via a browser may not be able to see the poll, but those of you who are logged in through Zoom, which is the vast majority, should be able to see. So that's just a profile of our audience, and 46% of those who responded are involved in the design certifier or assigned certifier role. The next biggest cohort of our attendees is building control in local authorities. Rather, it's not, it's other, in fact, by 1%, and then building construction, building control rather, building construction and legal and property conveyance. So again, you're all very welcome. Just go back to sharing my screen again and introduce our presenters. The first presenter is our Chief Executive, John O'Connor, and John has a wide range of experience in the housing and building control sectors. He's an engineer by background and had significant input and involvement in designing the building control regulations and the steering group around building control and certification. So thank you very much to John for his time this afternoon. And our second speaker is Richard Butler from the National Building Control Office, and Richard is an expert in building control codes and standards and leads the inspections pillar with the National Building Control Office. Richard is an engineer by profession as well, and we're delighted to have Richard with us. So thank you very much indeed, both, for your time. And at this stage, that is enough from me. I will hand you over to our first expert speaker, which is indeed our Chief Executive, John O'Connor. So John, I'd ask you to please unmute, and you should be able to hopefully share your screen. And while John is doing that, we'd remind you that we will make the recording available shortly, and indeed the slides will be available as well if you want to email us, info@housingagency.ie. So John is sharing his screen there, and hopefully all is well on that front. And I will, in the background.
Okay, thank you much, David.
Perfect. Over to you, John. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, David, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad to be speaking on this topic. Now we're 30 years on from the Building Control Act in 1990. Just by way of background, you'd all be aware or be familiar with the tragic Stardust fire on the 14th of February 1981, Valentine's Day. Tragically, 48 people died in that fire, and that led to the Fire Services Act in 1981, and then on to the Building Control Act in 1990. The Building Control Act in 1990, the minister at the time who brought it in was Pádraig Flynn from Mayo, and it was also the year of Italia 90. I gave my first public lecture. It was on the Building Control Act on the 14th of June 1990, in the middle of Italia 90, and surprisingly 300 people turned up at the time, but it was an important area in terms of the introduction of a different form of building control in the country. A number of issues just in relation to the Act in 1990 that I think we shall all be reminded of is, firstly, the legislation is enabling legislation, and it's under the Building Control Act that building control regulations and building regulations are made. But there's a number of very specific items in the Act that are important. One, in terms of the responsibility for compliance, rests with building owners, builders and designers. And Section 3.5 in particular, every building to which building regulations apply shall be designed and constructed in accordance with the provisions of such regulations. So it's just very important that we're all aware of that. The Act also gives powers of inspection. So there's powers of inspection by authorised persons. These would be authorised by the building control authorities, they are the local authorities, or the minister to carry out inspections or to request information. That's Section 11 of the Act. And offences and penalties are covered in the Act, Sections 16 and 17. The Building Control Act of 1990 is still very much the most important piece of legislation from building control's perspective. There was a significant act in 2007 that made some changes to the Primary Act, and it introduced provision for disability access certificates. And then there was an act in 2014 that made some further amendments. But in terms of one of the biggest changes that happened from 1990 happened in 2014 with the Building Control Amendment regulations, which we talk about, which brought in significant additional requirements in relation to the building control system. I think this is an important slide. I'm just going to spend a few minutes on this slide in particular, which is an overview of the overall building control system as it is today. There's the Building Control Acts, which is the overall legislation that governs building control. And then there's two very important sets of regulations. There's the building regulations and the building control regulations. It's important maybe to note that the system could operate purely with the Building Control Act and the building regulations. But the building control regulations bring additional measures to ensure compliance. The building regulations set out the technical requirements for compliance with any building work. And it's very important, anyway, any of us involved in building control to be aware of the regulations and what applies depending on the type of work that's being carried out. And underneath the building regulations, we have the technical guidance documents, which provide guidance in relation to compliance with the building regulations. And they vary from Part A, structure, down to Part M, access. So it's very, very important, and just realize that the building regulations are the primary document. Then we have building control regulations, and the purpose of building control regulation is to provide additional measures in relation to ensuring compliance with building regulations. Right from the start, we had commencement notices and fire safety certificates. Then in 2007, disability access certificates were added. And then there was very significant additional requirements introduced in 2014, and we're going to look at those requirements shortly. There was also a statutory code of practice for inspecting and certifying of buildings and works. I was involved in the drafting of that code, along with a representative group from the industry and the department, and in relation to the certification system that was included in the amended building control regulations at that time. So the building control amendment regulations of 2014, known often as BCAR, introduced 4 additional specific measures. 1, statutory certification was introduced. The lodgement of plans was introduced. An inspection regime for during construction, and a validation process for building control authorities at commencement stage and completion stage. Also, statutory roles were introduced: the design certifier, the assigned certifier, and the builder. I'm not going to go through all the details, but there's certain obligations on the building owners, and they're set out there, and these slides will be shared with you. In terms of building control, maybe there's 3 stages that are particularly important. These are commencement, during construction, and completion stage. So if we look at the commencement stage, first of all, the commencement notice has always had to be lodged, but there's now additional requirements in relation to the commencement notice that is submitted. There is now a requirement, since 2014, to lodge plans with the commencement notice, and to lodge a preliminary inspection plan with that commencement notice. There is a requirement to lodge a design certificate with the commencement notice. Now, Richard will be talking later. All of this lodgement is lodged with the building control management system, a national system that Richard will speak about. Then there's the construction stage. And at the construction stage, there's requirements on the builder to construct in accordance with the plans and specifications, and generally in accordance with the building regulations. There's requirements on the assigned certifier, who prepares and implements the inspection plan and coordinates what's happening from that perspective during construction. Inspection is a critical element of the 2014 amended regulations. So the assigned certifier and others carry out inspections, and there's an inspection plan, and there's a record of those inspections. Then we move on to completion stage, And at completion stage, again, there's documents that have to be submitted. Again, they're online to the building control management system, a certificate of compliance and completion, plans, and if there's changes to the plans, and the inspection plan that was implemented. There's a completion certificate. This is the most important certificate that is required in the building controls system, and assigned by the builder and by the assigned certifier, and is supported by ancillary certificates. And also at the completion stage, there's a validation process by the Building Control Authority to ensure everything is in order. There are timeframes and methods in terms of dealing with the validation process. And very importantly, the certificate must be submitted, validated, and placed in a register before the building, can be used. In terms of building control and building regulations, it's often the result of tragedies such as stardust or significant problems. This is a Priory Hall, a lot of construction issues and non-compliance with building regulations involved. And we've had a lot of issues, particularly with multi-unit developments and the defects in them. Even with houses, here's in Newbridge in Kildare, where a terrace of houses burnt down as a result of a fire starting one house and then lack of fire stopping, at roof level and fire spread. A couple of things I just want to talk about in particular is the importance of inspection. And this is a phrase I always like and applies across the board to lots of different areas, is you get what you inspect, not what you expect. So inspection is critically important. So I was involved, with the industry and with the department in relation to the regulations, and the code of practice came out in 2014. And a major part of it is to do with inspecting of building works and ensuring that works are built correctly in the first instance. One particular concern I have, both on the design and assigned certifier side and builder side, and also maybe within building control authorities, is we can get very caught up in paperwork and bureaucracy and making sure all the forms are filled out and everything is in place. But inspection is critically important. So I just ask all of you just to think about how much time do you spend on the inspecting side as opposed to the paperwork side. And the balance has to be, and should be on the inspection side, that there can be just too much focus on the paperwork. In the programme for government, there's a lot of attention in terms of on the building control system and the issues in terms of defective housing in particular, and in relation to building control, there's talk about having a building standards regulator in place, and the re-establishment of the building regulatory advisory body, which is provided for in the 1990 Act, and also then to address issues in relation to defective housing, as were brought up in the Safe as Houses report from the Joint Oireachtas Committee on Housing. I just want to give you my own view in relation to where we need to possibly improve on the system. And it goes back to the whole area of inspection. So in terms of those involved in design and construction and the inspection systems, that they're robust. And then in relation to building control authorities who provide that independent in inspection regime, kind of critically important maybe that we strengthen that further. And I would advocate strongly, building control authorities coming together on a regional basis or on a national basis to put in inspectorate teams that can focus on specific areas such as the residential buildings, houses and apartments, and again focus on boots on the ground and the inspections of those, to ensure that we get a high level of compliance. So inspection would be high on my agenda, and in terms of any changes to the system. I just want to bring it back, just two remaining slides, is buildings and health. BRE, the British Research Establishment, carried out a longitudinal study on housing and health that finished in the 1980s. So this looked at, over a long period of time, at houses and apartments and tracked the occupants of those in terms of serious illness and death or fatalities. And the top issues affecting health, when I say health, is a serious health issues or death. Daylight was the most important one that they found, followed by ventilation, then by hygiene and fire safety. There were others as well, but these were the top four. So you might be surprised to see that fire safety came in at number 4. Daylighting, and why that was found to be so important, it caused serious mental illness or additional mental illness per daylighting, and the level of suicide in properties that had poor daylighting was higher than in ones with better daylighting. And it's one area maybe that there's no requirements in the building regulations regarding daylighting. However, they are covered normally through the planning system. And then to finish with, and going back to the 1990 Act, the main purpose of building regulations, there are other purposes, but the main purpose is for securing the health, safety and welfare of persons in or about buildings. I think maybe we should all just remember that. It's about health, safety and welfare of people in buildings, and that's the whole purpose of building regulation, the primary purpose. There are other purposes such as energy conservation and other matters, but health and safety are the primary matters. So that's a very quick run through from 1990 up to today. So I'll hand you back to David. Thank you very much. I'll just stop sharing there.
Thank you very much indeed, John. Comprehensive presentation on the main issues from the Building Control Act 1990 since and to date. It occurs to me briefly that the Programme for Government aspect on building defects, the Minister announced yesterday evening a working group to consider the matter. So just worth making that aware. I'm sure people have seen it in the media. Moving on, I'm delighted to hand over now to Richard Butler from the National Building Control Office. Richard, I'd ask you to unmute and share your slides. You're ahead of me, so that's great. And I'll turn off my camera. Just to say, we have a number of questions coming in and we'll address those at the end. And we have a couple of questions that came in during the period while people were registering for the event. So Richard, if you want to maximize the view of the slides there, we'll should look good. And John, I'd ask you maybe to mute yourself there as well, just in the background, and we'll make sure that all is well. So Richard, if you want to expand to a full screen view, that'd be great. And I'll hand over to, that's perfect, Richard, and I'll hand over to Richard now. So thanks very much indeed.
Thanks, David. Thanks, John. Good afternoon, everyone. The National Building Control Office is managed by Dublin City Council on behalf of the 31 building control authorities with the objective to promote a culture of compliance with the building regulations. The office can operate from anywhere, and since COVID-19, it has been business as usual. Our contact email is support@nbco.gov.ie. The practical operations of BCAR 2014 from the NBCO's perspective and the BCMS. The object of the National Building Control Management Project is to promote a culture of compliance with the building regulations through a reform and strengthening building control system and an inspection regime, developing and implementing standardized approaches and common protocol, better support and further development of the BCMS system. The National Building Control Management Project provides strategic oversight, support and direction for the development, standardization and implementation of building control as an effective shared service in the 31 building control authorities. We implement BCAR 2014 through our 4 pillars: training, compliance and support, building control management system, BCMS, and inspections. The 31 building control authorities are divided into 3 regions: Eastern and Midland region, Northern and Western region, Southern region, that the NBCO and the Department of Local Government and Housing meet regularly. It has become an effective way of agreeing and implementing standardizing processes, systems and structures in building control authorities. Pillar 1, training. The National Building Control Office, in association with Institute of Technology Carlow, run a certificate in building control management course, recognised as the minimum standard in building control. The first cohort of students has completed the course, and the course will recommence in October 2020. It will be delivered using IT Carlow's virtual learning environment due to COVID-19 restrictions. Pillar 2, compliance support. The compliance support pillar of the NBCO provides information, advice, oversight, and other support to building control staff and the public in relation to the area of building control. The NBCO provides guidance documents, good practice guidelines, publish a quarterly newsletter. We also make YouTube help videos, all of which can be found on localgov.ie webpage. You can follow us on Twitter at NBCO Ireland for updates. A framework document for building control authorities was produced to standardise work practices, systems, procedures and decision-making in relation to oversight of building control activities across all building control authorities. The framework document outlines the role of building control authorities. It is available to download on the localgov.ie webpage. The BCMS system allows for the following online submissions of commencement notice types, certificates and compliance for completed buildings or works, and since July of this year, online submission of fire safety certs, disability access certs, certificates, relaxations, and we now have a full suite of building control notices on the BCMS system. Statutory Building Control Register. The BCMS also provides a building control register of notices and certificate of compliance on completion in accordance with Data Protection Act 1998 and 2003. The register contains information such as commencement notice numbers, locations, project descriptions, etc. Register allows for online search by the public. In order to download a copy or print a copy of individual notice, users need to be logged into the BCMS system. Pillar 4, inspections. The 31 building control authorities are designated as building control authorities under the Building Control Acts 1990 to 2020 as amended. Building control authorities have strong powers in inspection and enforcement under the Act. Section 8 provides for enforcement, section 11 appointment of building control officers and power of inspections for compliance with regulations. The NBCO has designed an inspection performance framework to help building control authorities in order to continue to improve their work in promoting a culture of compliance with building regulations. Information on inspections and enforcement activities is provided by the Building Control Authority, which informs results of assessments made through the framework. Building control authorities and authorised officers' duties include enforcing compliance with building control regulations and building regulations, scrutinising building proposals, validating notices, certificates and applications, assessing and granting applications, inspecting work or buildings and requesting compliance information, serving enforcement notices, legal proceedings for breach of regulations, maintaining the statutory public building register. As building control authorities have a function under the Construction Product Regulations and the European Union Performance of Buildings Directive. Regulatory oversight is necessary to ensure that any failure of regulation among the agencies involved, be they the homeowner, the designer, builders, etc., is detected and remediated in an effective and timely manner. The aim is that the power of enforcement and prosecution will become a more credible threat to those who are non-compliant. The overall objective of the building control system is to achieve quality and safety in and around buildings. This is done by empowering professionals in design and construction activity. Owners, builders and construction professionals need to comply with statutory obligations under the Building Control Acts. The NBCO is committed to the future of building control by continuing to promote a culture of compliance with the building regulations through a reform and strengthening of the building control system and a strengthened inspection regime in accordance with the programme for government. We will do this through our existing 4 pillars and our new proposed 5th pillar, market surveillance. The future of training. In the constant changing environment of building regulations, Part L being the most requested area of training in 2020, the NBCO will further develop the training pillar with guidance from the training working group and in collaboration with third level institutes, the local authority, regional training centres, other relevant stakeholders. We strive to build training capacity in a number of areas and increase the competencies of building control officers in the sector. The first round of the certificate in building control management has just been completed with 111 individuals now accredited by IT Carlow. By making this course the minimum requirement for building control officers, it elevates the role of building control officers to a more professional level. We are also in the progress of progressing an MSc in building regulatory compliance in association with Waterford IT, which will allow for specific ideas or topics to be researched in depth. As well as this, the NBCO issued an annual CPT building control training, which is an annual list of approved short building control courses. This list is reviewed and updated annually. The NBCO are currently engaged with professional bodies such as Engineers Ireland, the Royal Institute of Architects Ireland and the Society of Chartered Surveyors Ireland to provide CPD training related to building control, such as our recent webinar on SI 243 of 2012. Cross-sector collaboration allows the NBCO to reach a wider audience and get feedback from all parties involved in the process. The future of compliance support. The NBCO, through its compliance support pillar, promotes best practice in relation to compliance with legislation. We provide information, advice, oversight, and other support to building control staff and private practitioners making submissions to the building control authorities in relation to the area of building control. Review of best practice methodologies on risk assessments and the publication of guidance notes and frequently asked questions are done on an ongoing basis, and the NBCO is currently working on good practice guidelines for the submission of commencement notices and fire safety certs. The compliance support programme is designed to focus on 5 key deliverable elements: building control campaigns, communication to promote a culture of compliance. 2, reporting. Departmental returns, key reports have been returned to the department monthly. 3, guidance process, policy and procedures. 4, customer relation management queries. We deal with about 180 to 300 per month. And then our 5th one is GDPR and FOI. The future of the building control management system, the BCMS. The NBCO manages the system for building control administration to ensure an effective national administration system for building control in Ireland with a standardised approach across the sector. The BCMS is a critical national information system contributing to the national infrastructure to effectively administer the building control service in the 31 building control authorities. Like any system, it requires annual maintenance, upgrading, and improvement program to add new features to further enhance the system. We are currently operating version BCMS 1.5. It is proposed to rebuild the system over the next 2 years to develop BCMS 2.0 with cloud-based technology and APIs to other systems such as inspection apps. Currently, a broad range of stakeholders request daily access to our data. The NBCO are currently developing a secure open data portal for our data under the objectives of the Public Sector Data Strategy 2019 to 2023. This will contribute to the development of a single point of accessing data in relation to building control for Ireland's policymakers, civil servants, businesses, owners, and general public. The future of inspections. I am leading the inspections pillar in the NBCO to strengthen and standardise the inspection regime in the 31 local authorities. Inspections are one of the most important ways of enforcing regulation and to ensure regulatory compliance. NBCO staff are assisting with building control inspections, standardising inspection data collection through the use of inspection apps. How regulations are implemented and enforced are critical determinants of whether a regulatory system is working as intended. Based on the 2014 OECD Best Practice Principles for Regulatory Enforcement, and inspections, the OECD Regulatory Enforcement Inspection Toolkit offers government officials, regulators, stakeholders, and experts a simple tool for assessing and inspecting and enforcing system in a given jurisdiction, institute, or structure. It is a checklist of criteria which can be used to identify, strengthen, and weaknesses, gauge actual performance, and pinpoint areas for improvement. Our new pillar 5, market surveillance. Building control authorities are designated market surveillance authorities for construction products that fall within the scope of the Construction Product Regulations 2013. With a no-deal Brexit back in the headlines, we need to ensure that our industry is Brexit ready. There was a BCMS alert issued lately with very useful information and links to documents. It is proposed to set up a national market surveillance unit within the National Building Control Office to ensure construction products placed on the market and used in construction are compliant with the required EN standard. It is important that builders, specifiers, designers, certifiers, etc. are aware of the guidance and changes that Brexit may bring to the construction product regulations. They should ensure that CE marking, declarations of performance, and relevant products related documents is appropriate to demonstrate and ensure compliance with the building regulations. Thanks everyone for your time and attention today. I will hand back to David.
Thank you very much indeed, Richard. Fantastic update on the work of the National Building Control Office, and in particular the changes and increasing use of the BCMS system. And hopefully you can all see me okay. We just stopped sharing Richard's slides there. So we're into our some time for questions and answers. And the first question we have, I might ask John to unmute his mic as well. So the first question we had in, this came in over the weekend, in fact, ahead of the session. So I'll just read it out, and maybe I think, Richard, you might be in a position to provide a response. So the question is, having regard to the assigned certifier's role defined in the Code of Practice for inspecting and certifying buildings and works dated September 2016, can the panel comment on A, whether in their view there is a consistency of approach adopted by assigned certifiers in terms of their detailed tasks for developments, and B, whether they consider that the creation of an assigned certifier role has been a success, and do they consider that any refinements of the role or refinements to the role are required? And maybe Richard, give that over to you for comment.
Well, the first part there really would be that all assigned certifiers have to work to the Code of Practice, and they have to take into consideration the design of the project, their due diligence in working out the risks, and the design information that's provided to show compliance, and the competencies of all the other parties, the design, the ancillary designers, and the builders. And ultimately, the responsibility for compliance with the building regulations rests with the owners, builders, and designers under the Building Control Act. The second part of the question, the role of the assigned certifier, has it improved? I think the combination with the strong regulations in BCAR 2014, plus the requirements to have design information submitted before commencement, has also added to the improvement of the system. Any comments on John?
Yeah, just very quickly, in terms of
John, maybe over to you.
Yeah, just two quick comments. In terms of having the Code of Practice in place and the engagement between the various professional institutions, it does lead to consistency across assigned certifiers, but there is still work to be done to get greater consistency, maybe better training and education in the area of building control. And the second part of the question, the assigned certifier has been generally a success, where people take it seriously, so it has been a success. But again, particularly in the area of inspection, I think we probably need to do more. Thanks.
Great, thanks, thanks Richard, thanks John. The next question, and there's a good number coming in, and I think it was sent in early on, so it might be directed at John's presentation. So the question is, why is it not appropriate to carry out a technical assessment at validation stage, particularly if it is obvious that there are design flaws?
in terms of that issue, is it's not a time to open up things at completion stage. Like if there were issues during construction that a building control authority have raised, well then it is appropriate to at completion stage to bring them up if they haven't been addressed. But it's not the time to be assessing a project if it hasn't been, if issue hasn't been raised previously. So that's probably the issue. You don't want to be doing a full design review at that point. If you think there's design flaws, carry that out earlier on and then raise them again at completion stage if they haven't been addressed.
Okay, thank you, John. A question that has come in here from Pranesh Ranamund, who I know is the practice director with the RIAI. So thank you very much, Pranesh, for joining us. And maybe I think this might go to Richard. Are we seeing a noticeable trend in improvement of quality through inspections? How much resources are being devoted to this area, and will they be strengthened in future, do you foresee? So maybe Richard. Noticeable trends and improvements, quality through inspections.
The building control authorities have to get about 15% of all commencement notices and that for the NOAC data, but a lot of building control authorities are doing repeat inspections, which are not counted in the data collection. They're also doing a lot of desktop assessments and that are not actually complete, are not in the stats that NOAC use. So it's a bit unclear to kind of say that they're not doing it based on that stat. You know.
Okay. John, have you any comments on that, or will we move on to another?
No, we didn't move on.
No problem. The question is it proposed to have a dedicated building control officer for large-scale projects, which must be present for site inspections and have authority to sign off build stages above a certain site, above a signed certifier, funded as standard developer cost? BCMS only reviewed in detail if something fails. It doesn't integrate building control checks through the project life cycle. So a dedicated building control officer for large-scale projects, John.
The simple answer is no. I mean, there's no plan to introduce that as part of the system. You know, I'd say the responsibility is with the owners, the designers, and the builders. You know, and building control authorities there are in a role to carry out inspections as they see appropriate. But answer to that question is no.
Okay, thanks, John. A question, I think a Brexit question, because it's along with everything else, it's one of the topics of du jour. And I think it might be for Richard perhaps to comment on. In terms of the CPR regulations, I wonder if that meant to be CPD, will the NBCO or NSAI have a database of UK notified bodies who will lose their notified body status at the end of the transition period of Brexit? How will this affect the supply of construction goods from the UK as a whole? So Richard.
The department issued a Brexit alert through the BCMS. There is useful information there, and products will have to be checked to see what their certified body is, and if it's in the UK that the body is, and they do not have a body outside the UK, the product may not be fit for use in the Irish market.
Okay, and another one I think for Richard. What level of building control authority inspections are being carried out across the country? Where can one find the statistics? Are there plans to increase the level, and perhaps by when?
Currently, the only statistics is the NOAC data, and the department, along with ourselves, are looking to make submissions in relation to inspections to have that data increased on the number of and type of inspections and the request for informations. And
okay, very good, thanks Richard. There was a question in relation to the training webinar I think the NBCO gave on the statutory instrument. Is that available for people to view? Is it online?
Yeah, they're all on our NBCO DCC YouTube video if you have an account.
Great. Perfect. So people should be able to search in
YouTube first.
Search in that and should be search at YouTube. Perfect.
There's also a link on the website as well.
Is excellent. Thank you, Richard. A question that has been sent in is, when will the Builders Register become statutory and replace Siri? Are there any proposals around that? Maybe John?
There is legislation that still has to be brought through to put that on a statutory basis. So the legislation isn't in place yet, but it is on the programme for government in terms of its agenda, in terms of bring that through.
Okay, a question around ancillary certifiers. So certain assigned certifiers rely heavily on ancillary certifiers for inspections, ancillary certs, etc. Is there a minimum percentage of inspections that should be carried out by the assigned certifier? Either of you, I'll throw that open.
Well, it goes back to their inspection preliminary inspection plan, so that the designer and the assigned certifiers will have to outline the risks in the building. So the simpler the building, maybe the less inspections. The more complicated the building, the more inspections, if you take it as that approach. But it will be dependent on factors, competencies of all the other designers, builders, and the speed of work too.
Yeah, and if I could add, in terms of, I think it is important, one, that the assigned certifier is fully on top of the inspections that are being carried out, and ensuring that the various parties are inspecting. And I do think the assigned certifier should carry out a level of inspections themselves. Again, as Richard said, it depends on the complexity of the building, but it is important that the assigned certifier is involved to an extent in the inspections, and just doesn't leave it all off to somebody else, or other parties to do those inspections.
Just going back there, the assigned certifier has give undertakings under the statutory forms to sign to actually carry out the inspections, and the code of practice requires them to do the inspections.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Another question on, I suppose, paperwork, for want of a better term. As part of the safety file, should all ancillary certs be provided, or is the BCAR completion cert sufficient? And what should be the minimum paperwork insisted on? Maybe John, will I pass that to you?
And now, when somebody talks about the safety file, this is under health and safety construction regulations. It's a safety file handed over at the end of a project. It probably would be appropriate to include all the certification that was included as part of that safety file. I think it probably would be a useful thing to include. You don't want to have an overly complicated safety file, but I think that would be appropriate material to have in that format.
That's great. Thank you very much indeed. And a question from Patrick Daly. Do the panel have any comments or feedback on how well the opt-out arrangements for private residential developments works? Where is that in terms of?
Yeah. If I give my people on one-off houses, they can opt out of the system. They still have to submit a commencement notice, but they opt out of certification. My own personal view is that it would be useful that a completion notice was also provided where somebody opt out. So even from the point of view of being able to count completed houses, but I personally don't think it is. The opting out isn't a good thing, because a lot of problems are caused by one-off houses.
Okay, thank you very much, John. It's 5-1, and we said we'd respect people's time and conclude. I know there are a lot of other questions that have come in, and we might be able to get back to people offline. We do have a record of those coming in. If there are any last wrap-up comments for Richard or John.
Yeah, David, I'd make just a couple of comments and just answering some of the questions there. The intention is to bring the Building Regulation Advisory Body back, to reappoint that. So that would be expected to be something that would definitely be done. Coming back to the issue of inspections by building control authorities, an earlier question, I do think a higher level of inspections is needed in buildings that have been showing up the defects. So the multi-unit developments, the apartment developments, and having a higher level of inspections where the consumer isn't involved as the client for a building. So if you've no involvement in a building and it's being built, that a higher level of inspections in those areas would be appropriate, I think. And the other questions, we can answer them and send them back to participants.
That's perfect. And Richard, just give you the opportunity for any final closing comments.
No, that's like the system is there. We're dealing with it. BCAR 2014 is here to stay, I think, and whether minor tweaks or that happen, that'll be for the department and ministers to make them regulations. But I think overall, with the building control authorities, education and training on the processes and has made a big difference to the whole sector.
Great, thank you for those final remarks. So with that, it falls to me to thank very much our presenters, to Richard from the NBCO and our own Chief Executive, John O'Connor. Very much appreciate your time this afternoon. As I mentioned at the outset, you can email info@housingagency.ie for a copy of the slides. We will make a recording of the session available and circulate that. A quick promo for our webinar over the next couple of weeks with the Construction Bar Association. So the date of that is subject to change, but keep an eye on our news and events website. That will deal with changes and updates in case law and some of the SHD decisions. So that'll be available, information on that will be available on our website, housingagency.ie, over the next couple of weeks. Thanks very much indeed to Mairead Phelan in the NBCO for her help and support in getting this webinar together. And again, to my own colleagues, to Michael McHale, Katrina Lawler, Mary Coffey and Sarah Kennedy. Thanks all indeed for tuning in, and we wish you a pleasant afternoon and time, of course, to get up to date on the latest COVID guidelines and measures. Gormila Mahagav, August Slán Tamil.